Now recording. So, furniture. There we go. So, this is review week. In this week we shall review. Today's class we will be doing a great big fat review of all of the topics that we've talked about in JavaScript over the course of this semester in preparation for the final examination. The final exam will be occurring next week on the Friday, I'm right? This one's Friday and JavaScript is Tuesday, right? Or no, this is JavaScript. Java is Tuesday, JavaScript is Friday, am I right? Both at 9 a.m., both on the second floor of A wing. I believe this one is in A222. So, all right, good. Are there any questions about the final exam before we proceed with the review? Not terribly or especially, it seems. Well, I'll give you one or two notes before we proceed with the review proper. You are permitted, as you were on the midterm, one 8.5 by 11 double-sided crib sheet. It is a single piece of printer paper or lined paper, whatever you like, upon which you may write anything you please. It is, a memory aid that is meant to sort of offset and elevate the amount of sort of basic recall which is necessary during the test. Basic recall which does not necessarily indicate your level of understanding of the material, right? The purpose of the test is more to test your understanding of the material rather than basic recall, which, the Java test, as I'm sure you are aware, focuses more heavily on the kind of basic recall type scenarios. The JavaScript test will be a bit more, do you understand concepts, right? If I give you a piece of code, can you tell me something about it, right? What's the difference between this and that? This type of stuff, this type of thing. So, once again, the great thing about a cheat sheet is that the production of the cheat sheet itself is the greatest studying you will do for the test. This is the reason I like them, because it forces you in some manner to study. This means that if you get someone else to make your cheat sheet, or you collaborate too heavily on it, you're basically kneecapping yourself. It's very likely that, on the secret Discord that the professors don't know about, people are gonna, put their cheat sheet up and, spread it around. It's like, hey, here you go, here you go. I've seen it. I've seen the duplicate copies, In the past, I've seen the duplicate copies to the extent that the people who made the cheat sheet watermarked an anime girl into the cheat sheet itself, and there were like 4 copies of it during the test. And I'm like, guys, come on, I originally thought it was a footprint that someone had like stepped on the page, but you look a little closer and no, that's not a footprint. So don't do that. Make your cheat sheet yourself. Now, that being said, there is some benefit to be gained from collaborative study. However, the benefit that you will get from collaborative study comes from after everyone has gone and done their separate revisions themselves, you come together afterwards and you quiz each other, you compare notes, you compare your cheat sheets, and that is, useful. It's useful because you might have missed something that somebody else had, and it's like, oh yeah, that's important. I'll put that on mine. That kind of thing. Ideally, the manner of your studying, you're doing maybe half an hour, getting close to the exam, so half an hour to an hour of studying per day, right? For a week ahead of the test is far more effective than cramming for the entire day before the test. You are activating your long-term storage rather than your short-term storage that way. Part of the purpose of the process of education is the particular material that I am currently teaching you, but a more important aspect of the education is you need to learn how to learn, right? Especially in a field like this one, because in software, there's almost a complete rotation in the technology every maybe 5 to 7 years, right? And you will be using completely different tools than you used 5 to 7 years ago every 5 to 7 years, which means that, congratulations, you are on a treadmill. You are on a treadmill and you don't get off until you retire, and that is the profession that you have chosen. You need to constantly be learning things, because that is the nature of this profession. This is not, this is not civil engineering, right? People have basically, civil engineering goes all the way back to the Romans and further than that, and a building, the way that the Romans built buildings is, basically the way we build buildings, just a matter of having fancier equipment, right? There are only so many ways to stack things on top of other things, right? But software changes completely every 5 to 7 years. So you gotta be on top of the changes. So, any questions? All right. So, shall we discuss the particular content of the course then? Yes? Good? Good idea? What's going to be on the exam, you ask? Well, to paraphrase the bard, questions, questions, questions. I always like to make these a little bit collaborative, and I don't think I've heard one peep out of you guys all morning, so. So what do you think is going to be on the exam? I don't know what's going to be on the exam. What do you think is going to be on the exam?
DOM manipulation?
DOM manipulation sounds good. Certainly that will be a topic. Although I'm not sure that I consider DOM manipulation a topic in and of itself. It's more of a thing you have to know how to do to solve other problems. What else we got?
SVG.
SVG was certainly a major topic in the second half of the course. What else you got for me?
Ajax.
Ajax, also certainly a major topic in the second half of the course.
CSS and CSS animations.
Yep, CSS animation. Bootstrap, sure. You got anything else for me?
JavaScript syntax?
Yeah. So I normally, the title I use for this is normally language topics. So like, how does JavaScript the language work? Anything else? That's enough? I'll throw one more at you. JSON. JSON is important. Although I think that one's like relatively easy, you know. So, because this is a review session, and it's been like the stuff at the beginning of the course is the stuff it's been the longest since you've seen. I think that's kind of high value to bring back up at this point in time. Yeah. Unless anybody has any particular one of those topics that we'd like this. If anybody wants to pick one, please pick one. Anybody? No? Yeah.
Post requests.
Post requests. Let's put that under Ajax. Yeah. Get and post requests. All right. You want to start there? Sure. Okay. So, there's one more that I'm going to throw on there. Events. So, Ajax then. Ajax is a mechanism for JavaScript to request additional information from the server, right? This is different from the request which loads the HTML page, different from the requests that load additional resources, JavaScript files, CSS files, media files, etc. Normally what we are after from the server is some form of application data, things with the application /MIME type, things like JSON, things like CSV, occasionally things like HTML and plain text. Ajax. What does Ajax stand for?
Asynchronous JavaScript and XML.
Very good. Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So, when we perform an Ajax request, we are creating an HTTPS request packet. These request packets can have one of several request methods. The two request methods that we discussed here in this class are GET requests and POST requests. So, to understand how these two types of request methods handle data differently, we must think ever so briefly about the structure of an HTTP packet. A packet consists of a header at the top and a payload, sometimes called the body, after it. This is fundamentally a collection of characters that get packaged up and shot off through the network. Of these, one of these is encrypted. Which one?
The payload.
The payload is encrypted. The header is not encrypted. The header can't be encrypted because it contains information necessary for routing the packet through the network. GET requests are stored, or get parameters are stored where? The information sent by get. In the header. Which means post is stored in the payload. Post. There we go. Yes. So, this means that post information is encrypted, therefore somewhat more secure. Get parameters are unencrypted. So what do we never use get parameters to send?
Login information?
Login information, absolutely. Financial transactions. Anything sensitive always is a post request, right? So why even have get requests then? Why even send query parameters? Surely security is always good, right? More security is always better. Why would we ever want to send information in the unencrypted header?
Because not every node in the network can have the decryption key.
Not every node in the network can have the decryption key. True, but this doesn't answer the question, why would we ever want to send information into the network that anyone could read? Why wouldn't we want to always encrypt it?
One thing get requests will actually allow information to be able to see at least what the general topic of the information is that's actually traveling across the network.
I'm sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
I was gonna say that we should be using get requests because post requests don't allow information to travel over the network without being able to actually do it. And also get requests do at least display the topic of information in the post request that's actually in the payload.
Yeah, somewhat. One of the typical things that these are used for is creating links, right? So if you create just a normal regular link, there's no way to embed post data in just a normal anchor tag link. However, you can do that with a GET request. Because the requested material is in the URL, you can send somebody a link to a YouTube video, right? Because, you can also send them $v is equal to 3727135, right? So for shareables and sharing information, GET requests are often preferred. Post requests for anything sensitive. Make sense? Good. So let's review Ajax syntax. What is the name of the function that starts an Ajax request? Fetch. Good. What's the first parameter?
The response?
The response? No. The first parameter to the function.
The file?
Yes. The remote resource. I'm going to use PHP for no particular reason. What's the second parameter? It's an object containing all of the options. For example, what is the method of this request? Method, perhaps, is post. You also set the body content, the actual payload here. The data to be sent. Now this is assuming that data is a variable of some sort. We could say let data equal name is equal to Dr. Moore, yours truly. I think in class we called that params. Of course, with a post request, it's also necessary not only to tell us what method this is and what the actual data is, attach that to the method, or to the message. You also need to tell the server what form this data is taking. You need to set the content type. So, the line that sets the content type is long and difficult to remember, and I'm probably going to mess it up. So look it up and put it on your cheat sheet, right? Like, big star in the notes that you're taking, this goes on my cheat sheet. But I'll try to get it right. Headers yields another object, content dash type gets application slash x dash www dash form dash URL encoded. I think I got that right. Plus, is anybody like, how many people are working on assignment, final assignment 5? How many people have finished? Okay. Only a couple of days left. For assignment 5, you also need to include this. Credentials include. The reason that you need to include those, the reason that you need that line, when you do assignment 5, you will be uploading assignment 5 to the private directory in your CS Unix account, which means that all packets to and that are requesting things inside of your private directory must include the credentials, right? They must include the username, password. Now, in your browser, when you access the page, you get that little pop-up, looks a little bit like an alert box, username, password, login, you enter your details, you go to the page. The browser caches your username and password, and you can include those credentials in outgoing AJAX requests, but you have to select that option. It's not there by default. Does that make sense? Question?
So is it because it's a private, like password protected endpoint?
Yes.
And for obvious reasons, it doesn't automatically, does it cache your password and username regardless in the browser? Just whether or not you're trying to access that endpoint, will it like take it from the cache to then input it into whatever endpoint you're going to?
Yes, but only if you've included this.
But it caches it regardless?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, because it uses the same cached values to read all subsequent remote resources, like it doesn't re-prompt you for your password when you load a JavaScript file or a CSS file, right? So it's automatically sending those cached credentials for the purposes of like additional resource requests from the same page. AJAX, similar kind of thing. You just have to include this line.
Okay.
because it doesn't do it by default. Because, as you so astutely note, throwing your username password around willy-nilly is bad security policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that line will be necessary even on the GET request when you guys do assignment 5. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
Do you already do a GET request example or no?
Nope, we started with post because somebody requested we talk about post requests. Now is as good a time as any to talk about GET requests. So, with GET requests, we are embedding the information we are sending in the URL itself. That is this thing. That is actually a URL, or URI, one of the two of those. I can never remember which. If you modify this so that you have resource.php question mark plus data, this attaches the same URL encoded data to the URL rather than the body of the message. You then modify this guy to get, although you don't even have to do that because get is the default. This you do not include, and this you do not include, and you have a GET request sending the same data. Yes?
Sorry, so it's method get or just like get method close?
Oh, no, it's method is get.
Got
You
it.
assign the method as get rather than post. And again, you don't even have to explicitly do that, that's default. Yes?
So then just throwing something in the dark, resource.php question mark plus Mario plus ID, for example, for a get.
Well, for the, if you're talking about the assignments, it would, this would look like choice is equal to Mario,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In my case, like if you wanted name as Dr. Moore, then like I think it's a good idea to kind of externalize the data as a string. If you want to get extra super fancy, you save the data as an object and then you have a method or that you write or that you find, convert that to a URL encoded string. I imagine there's probably a method for it somewhere, but it's also easy enough to do by yourself with a simple loop. And probably good practice. So yeah, that's how you send the data. That's what the string looks like in the end. Remember that if you want to chain additional things on here, the separator character is ampersand, and name is equal to Luigi. And for those of you who never quite got the knack of it, this is how you draw an ampersand. You start here, draw a line up, make a little loop at the top, loop back and around and forward. And that's how you make an ampersand. So, did you know that ampersand means, like the term ampersand is like a contraction of Latin, which means and, which means and. So it's like a tautological definition encoded in the word itself. Anyway, that's not JavaScript. Let's continue with JavaScript. So once we have launched our request, we then have to decide what form of data the server will send back to us. The safe bet is that it's going to be text data. Normally, whatever you receive, it certainly will be character, plain old character data, although occasionally you will get, you'll get binary data back, but we don't really deal with that here. So basically you have a choice between text and JSON, according to kind of how this course has been going. The way that you extract that data is to use either .text on the one hand or .json on the other, appropriately to whatever you expect to receive from the server. Now, in technical point of fact, what you could do is you could write your program such that it looked at the content type of whatever it was the server sent back, and then make a decision about how to interpret it based on the content type. But in most cases, you just kind of look at what the server sends because you have knowledge of the server because you're programming the website, right? If you wrote the PHP script, you can kind of just decide its output's going to be JSON, write your code on the client side accordingly to what you made the server side do, right? This script always returns JSON, so JSON shall be its method of interpretation. So basically, you can expect a reasonable degree of consistency here, right? Pick the one that's appropriate. If on a test question, I say that the server is giving you JSON data, you use that one. If I say it's giving you text or string data, you pick that one. Make sense? Then, so to speak, we have the second then. You provide an anonymous function taking an argument, one argument, which is the data that we are receiving from the server. The data referenced here, in fact. And then you write your callback function. Your callback function will do something, you know. Maybe it's taking the data and constructing some HTML objects to contain it. Maybe it's modifying properties in the HTML in some manner, right? The purpose of Ajax is to be able to dynamically load information from the server without reloading the page. To be able to load a small section of the page as opposed to having to reload the whole thing to get more data. So, yeah, make sense? Question?
Yeah, can you show an example of grabbing the object type from a JSON file?
Grabbing the object type from the JSON file.
Or like a property of the object in the JSON?
Okay, so let's assume that our data looks something like the following. Let's assume that this is what our data looks like. I'm just going to pop this on the next screen. So inside of our function, you know, we could do something very routine. We could, like, take the person string and just, you know, bop it into the text content of a paragraph, right? Document dot query selector something with ID output, right? Dot text content is equal to data dot person. Something like that. Once you have the JSON data as a variable here, you can access all of the properties of it using dot notation and like normal access methods. Make sense?
Yes.
Any questions? Okay.
That's it?
You were expecting more?
Not really, but
This topic gets a lot more complicated once we start programming the server side.
yeah.
Yeah. This
Same
is just
trauma from PHP.
Hmm?
Just trauma from PHP.
Yeah, well, if we have any luck, I'll be able to get the rewrite for it done for these poor folks before they have to take it in the fall. We'll see though.
If I may, small tangent. Have you heard of HTMX?
HTMX.
Yes.
No, what's HTMX?
It's basically modern Ajax, where you can change like little subsets of the browser without reloading the rest of the page.
Is this like embedded in a framework or is this vanilla JavaScript?
It's actually in HTML, but yes.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
HTML?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'll send you a link.
Yeah, please do. Not my course then. You'd have to convince Corkegan to put it into HTML, CSS, which he's not going to. Well, maybe. We'll see.
I mean, you could technically scrap the Ajax and put that in.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is actually Kevin's problem in emerging web, actually.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something tells me you're still gonna have to know how to do just a straight old vanilla JavaScript Ajax request. You know?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. At least for the time being. I don't know. 5 years from now, this whole course might be TypeScript. So you know.
Or it might just be put this prompt in this AI and then find the bugs.
Well, I mean, yeah, we'll see.
Apparently that's junior developer jobs right now.
Yeah. See, not to get on too far of a tangent on that particular topic, but like, even if like that becomes overwhelmingly the dominant way that things are done in industry, like, I suspect that in a educational setting it still won't be appropriate. The problem with like there's an inherent paradox in AI use, right? All of the people who are really good at it and think it's just the bee's knees are people who came into the AI era already like highly skilled in the thing they're getting AI to do.
Yes.
Right? Which means that, you know, all of us poor untalented schlups, right, who don't really know anything, using AI to do all of your work is a great way to avoid ever having to learn anything, right? So if you use AI in that manner, you won't upskill to the point where these senior developers who are using it are, right? You will never become a senior developer if you use AI in order to do your work for you, right? So it's a paradox, right? It's like there needs to be some kind of pipeline from junior developer to senior developer. Otherwise, what happens when all the senior developers die and retire, right? There are no more developers, right? It does not seem to be the case that AI is replacing people's jobs. That doesn't seem to be a thing that's happening. And like, we're a couple of years into this now, right? And that was like the big promise. This was the thing that all of the business people were just salivating over, is all the people they could fire, right? If they could have, they would have by now. But it seems like I've talked to some people who are like reasonably highly positioned in a couple of different organizations, and I put the question to them directly: how many people has AI replaced? And a lot of the time the answer is either none or we've actually had to hire more people, right? So, and like, I was talking to one guy who's like very highly placed in Halton Healthcare on this question at the hackathon, yeah, that was his answer. It's like, we haven't fired anyone, you know. I was talking to a person who's reasonably high up in police services, in kind of like their digital infrastructure, kind of.
Yeah, Axios or Axiom.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, how many people have been let go over AI? And he's like, well, actually, we've had to hire people. So, so it doesn't seem like CS is dead.
Okay.
You know,
That's a bit better.
right? It's good to hear. But like, it's kind of like the way that I'm currently thinking about it is it's similar to how most technological transformations work. Like, imagine, you know, if you go back like, you know, several hundred years to your typical soil relocation technician, right? That is to say, ditch diggers, right?
Okay.
Guy with a shovel, right? Soil relocation technician, right?
Yeah.
People digging ditches, right? It's like, okay, that was low skill work. It's everybody's favorite example of low skill work, right? Although it actually takes more planning and organizing to dig a ditch that works and is correct than you might expect. Ask the Romans about that, because that's essentially what the aqueducts are, right? But anyway, the advent of the steam shovel, right, in theory, eliminated the need for people manually relocating soil, right? But, and like you think, oh, well, you know, there go all of those jobs out of the economy, right? But no, what happens is you now require an economy capable of producing and maintaining steam shovels. And that actually requires more people than handing people shovels and having them dig ditches, right? So over time, like the increase in product, like, and you know, steam shovels are better at digging ditches than people with shovels. So you get an increase in productivity in the ability to dig ditches, but you also have a corresponding increase in the number of people who are employed in the economy, right? The thing that changes is how much intelligence it takes to work the job, right? You know, your typical soil relocation technician did not require, you know, very much in the way of IQ to perform that work, so long as they were being supervised, right? By someone who knew where things were supposed to go. You know, you need a supervisor on any kind of work project, right? But to like work in an assembly plant for a steam shovel requires more intelligence than that, right? And this is kind of like, this is kind of the story of the economy all over, actually. Like, even if you consider, like, being a cashier, right? Like, if you consider being a cashier, like, back in the 1950s or something, right? Before the advent of modern POS systems, right? It's like, you know, you press button, you do small amount of math, you give people change, you close till, right? If you look, like, anybody here work at a cash, like, work cash in a retail or food service or anything like that? How complicated is the field of buttons? You know? It's murderously complicated. You have to, like, you know, it's like, oh, button, you want a hamburger with lettuce and tomato, and like, oh, you've got a coupon, oh God, I gotta go right back to the beginning of the order again, you should have told me you had a coupon before I started, you know? It's very complicated. It's surprisingly complicated entering somebody's order at a fast food
Aren't we
restaurant.
responsible for that though? Aren't we the ones responsible for that though?
What do you mean?
As the developers who made the POS?
Oh, well, see, it's interesting, yeah, because like, in some sense, yes, like, that part of the work of software engineers is to make everybody else's life miserable. Because software generally makes people's lives miserable. Just like ask any contemporary person, does software improve your life? Not really. Alright? You know, it's like, okay, sure, you know, instant messaging, you can communicate with people, but then there's the expectation that you're on your phone 24/7 for this, like, needy friend that you have, you know?
I apologize for
Yeah, it's, okay, we should get back to the review, but, like, the point I was circuitously trying to make is that, it seems like AI is doing the same thing. What it's eliminating is the low skill work in favor of people who are more, like, with higher levels of intelligence capable of doing the higher end work. It's giving more power to more highly intelligent people and taking it away from more low, like, people who are not as intelligent. And that seems to be the game that's been played ever since the dawning of the Industrial Revolution, so perhaps this is not, you know, unexpected. But that, it doesn't seem like there will be no jobs in software. Let me ask you a question. Do you think there's going to be any less software in the future?
No.
There you go. Alright, so, it is a treadmill though. Let's do JavaScript language topics, shall we? That's a nice, beefy topic. So, JavaScript language topics. Let's break that down a bit. So, we gotta talk about how the type system works. We should talk about strange operators and literals. It's important to talk about. We should talk about functions. More things as they come up. So, there are two words which characterize the JavaScript type system. Do you know what they are?
Weekly types.
Weakly typed and dynamic. Yes, so weak and dynamic. These are often confused. Yes,
So isn't that 3 words?
I mean, weak and dynamic.
But it's weekly type.
Four words then, if we're going to be pedantic about it. So, no matter how you wish to count the number of words, these terms are often confused. So, who can tell me what it means for a language to be dynamically typed?
Values are implicitly changed.
Values can have their types changed as we execute the program, yeah. So, under dynamic typing, I can say let x equal 5, and then I can assign to x, hello, this does not cause a problem. What is a language you have studied that is not dynamically typed? Java, that's right. Java will barf on that hard. Is Python dynamically typed? Yes, yes it is. You can always tell that you're working in a dynamically typed language because variable declaration does not require you to state the type, right? Let, sure, we have to declare it, but we're declaring that we're creating a variable, but we are not declaring the type with that. Good. Dynamic typing has more implications once we get into functions, but this is sort of a sufficient and small definition. How about weak typing?
Types of variable are changed for the sake of the operation.
Types of variables are changed according to the operation. Yes, so it performs implicit type conversion, right? So if all languages do this to some extent, even Java, right? In Java, if I say, x is equal to plus 5, the 5 is implicitly converted to a string and concatenated, right? Interestingly, Python doesn't do that. In Python, you have to use this guy, right? Much of the time, anyway. So, what differs is the extent to which this is applied. JavaScript goes so far as to allow this kind of nonsense. Implicit type conversion even in equality operations. The double equal sign in JavaScript should be understood as weak equality, right? This causes all kinds of problems, including things like, the violation of basic laws of logic. Right? If A equals B, if A equals B and B equals C, A should equal C, but they don't. And if you want another fun one of the absolutely fundamental laws of logic is a property called reflexivity, which is to say that a value should always equal itself, right? A value should, does anybody disagree that a value should always equal itself? Here's one for you. Not a number does not equal itself. So how do you test for it? That's how you test it. So weak typing is horrible and problematic and masks many errors, which, basically, among programming languages, you have a couple of competing philosophies. The Java philosophy is, if you say something stupid, you should feel the pain. The pain is corrective. If you feel the pain, you will correct your stupidity, and therefore be less stupid. The philosophy behind JavaScript is, oh, it's okay, I know you're stupid, I'm stupid too, we'll both be stupid together. JavaScript refuses to give you useful error information almost at all costs. Man, I was reading about a thing that I saw in someone's bloody AI-generated assignment 4. So it turns out that there's like a new operator that was introduced I think 5 years ago for JavaScript. So say you have an object like this, x is 5, and then you try to access y, right? This results in an error, right? This doesn't have that property. But apparently, if you insert a question mark now, instead of giving it an error, it returns undefined instead. Which, okay, but the error was useful. And it's amazing because you read this thing on Stack Overflow of all of these bloody JavaScript developers who are like, oh, it's so nice, we don't see the ugly error anymore. And it's like, you idiots! The error was supposed to be there, telling you something useful. That was one of the few cases left where JavaScript would actually give you a good, honest error. It's like, oh no, we don't want the ugly errors. It's like, it's just a different world over there. I don't understand it. I don't understand JavaScript developers. Yeah, okay. So let's move from talking about JavaScript's silly type system to talking about its strange operators and literals. There are kind of a collection of them that we haven't talked about. It seems like a lot of the changes to ECMAScript over the last couple of years have been to introduce a bunch of strange literals that the purpose of, or strange operators, the purpose of which is to try to, in some way, deal with the strangeness of JavaScript itself. The important one for the moment is this one. Strong equality. Strong equality is different from weak equality. Things which equate under weak equality will not necessarily equate under strong equality, because strong equality considers the types of things before it considers their values. Does that make sense? In addition, oh, yes, question?
This is sort of a side topic, but can you also cover the true and false values with like an assignment operator as well?
Yes. True and false values with the assignment operator, yeah. So, something like that showed up on the midterm, right? The question is, how does assignment behave? Right? First, it does modify memory, even in this context. 5 does get the x does get the value 5. However, assignment operations are substituted for the value assigned. That's how assignment, apparently even C does it this way. So, when we perform that assignment, x equals 5 is substituted for the value assigned, which is 5. So then the question became, how do you evaluate if 5? Yes?
True.
That's right. So the way that Booleans work, the way that conversion of a non-Boolean to a Boolean works, if the value is equivalent to 0, it's a false. If it's anything that's not 0, it's true. So if we're talking integers, 0 is false, -1 off to wherever, +1 off to wherever, all of these regions are true. Right? Make sense? That is probably the most horrible brace I've ever done in my long career of teaching. There we go. Alright. Make sense?
Yes. What about with regards to an empty string, or like a string of characters?
So an empty string, right, isn't actually empty. What does an empty string contain? The null character. So all empty strings actually contain the null character. The null character has an ASCII value of 0. So the empty string is actually 0. Thus, well, you know, you can test it on your browser right now, right? Somebody enter that in and tell me what you get. Does it execute the true or the false branch? See, here's the thing, right? I kinda would have to test it. Did you test it?
Yes,
What do you get?
the false one.
The
Yes.
false branch. Cool. Because, like, I don't know if they're like auto-boxing string literals inside of a string object, and I don't know if all objects will test as true. Right? That's kinda like the level that we're at. But, by the way, that's what it's called, is auto-boxing, when you have a literal and it automatically packages it as like an object. Yes?
I was just about to ask what you just said there.
Yeah. Java does it. So, you know, in Java with generics, you can't actually provide a primitive, right? You can't have a list of ints,
Yeah,
or an array list of ints, you have to have an array list of integers.
sure.
right? But you don't require the integer class constructor every time you use one. You can just plump little integer literals in there and it just does it.
Okay.
It's auto-boxing them.
I've never heard that term before.
Yeah. Now you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a class, and you may have even learned something.
And I'll probably forget that too.
Well, education is whatever is left behind after you forget everything you learned in school.
Yeah.
So, alright, good. Let's talk about some strange literals. We've got several nullish types in JavaScript. We have null. What else do we have?
Undefined.
Undefined. What else? And what's the one that's tricky to remember?
Infinity?
Yeah. Infinity. That's an actual value. So, basically all of these are, they don't necessarily mean nothing, right? If you consider Java's void, the void type in Java, null most of the time means empty, right? That's kind of like how you think in Java. Null means empty. Often, null or undefined means access error, right? Like, if you create a variable and you haven't given it a value, it's undefined until you give it a value. Which, in most other languages, if you try to access the variable before you've put anything into it, you get an error, right? Even in Python, right? This is actually a common trap for new Python programmers, of which there are many. Almost everybody who uses Python is a new Python programmer, right? You're right, I'm right. So, most proper languages would not allow you to read a variable before you wrote to it. That would be an error. In Java, it just throws you a default value. That's how they solve that problem. Here, you have this kind of weird literal that the thing picks up in place of an error, right? And the purpose of most of these things is to, once again, JavaScript, avoid giving the user a useful error. This one, for example, what's this one for? What error does it avoid? What does 5 divide by 0? Sorry, what?
It's nonsense if it's undefined.
That's one answer. Another answer is this, right? If you take a look, at the graph, right, sure, as if this is at x and this is 5 divided by x, sure, at the actual point of 0, it's undefined. This is gonna, I'm sorry, I have to do some calculus to you. But the limit as x approaches 0 of 5 over x is equal to positive or negative infinity, right? Although that point is undefined, as we approach 0, we are definitely going off to infinity, right? So that's why this is often considered to be Like if you divide by something by 0, then it's just infinity. So this thing avoids a div 0 error, right? Anywhere that a normal, proper, good language would give you a div 0 error, JavaScript drops this stupid infinity literal into your calculation. And let me ask you a question. What is infinity plus 1? What is infinity divided by 72?
Smaller infinity.
What is infinity divided by infinity?
Smaller infinity.
Well, it depends on the order of the infinities, right? That's more math, we don't have to worry about math. Yes,
Not a number equals not a number is false, right?
that's right.
Infinity equals infinity is true?
That's a good question.
It is.
Is it? Yeah, that's stupid. Yeah, so infinity is equal to infinity. And that's like the one thing that you absolutely can't say, right?
They are not, even with strong, with 3 equal signs, it's still true.
Oh man, it's so dumb. So yeah, the infinity, by the way, if you go into Cookie Clicker and you type game.cookies equals infinity, you beat Cookie Clicker. So that's what that's for. It's in order to avoid JavaScript developers having to look at a div 0 error, right? So what is this for? What error do JavaScript developers avoid seeing with not a number?
Number plus undefined?
Yeah, that's one. That's one way to produce it, right? But the error we're trying to avoid is arithmetic errors, right? Type errors. I'm trying to perform an arithmetic operation on things that are not numbers, right? So, like, you know, false minus cheese, right, is not a number, right? Stuff like that. Oh, while we're on the subject of numbers, here's just another reminder about how JavaScript is awful. JavaScript does not have float, slash, double, and integer as data types. It may surprise you that JavaScript does actually keep track of some data types, right? I sometimes joke that JavaScript only has one type and it's garbage. So both floating point numbers and integers, which are represented very differently in hardware, are collected under one data type called number. JavaScript only has a number data type for numbers. But of course, that's ludicrous. It can't simultaneously maintain two representations of a number, so it picks one. Any guesses which one it picks?
The whole number?
Nope. It does not pick integers, because if you were to pick integers to represent floats, right, it couldn't, right? No. All numbers in JavaScript are represented as floats, and they call them numbers. It's awful. Floating point error. They never heard of it. Yes?
Don't we have big int?
We do have big ints, yes, but that's like only for really big numbers. I suppose, I don't know, could you use a big int for a small int? Probably, but you know. Big int is kind of a concession to the fact that they designed their class system horribly, you know. Big int is something Python does by default in the background, by the way. Python avoids the problem of integer overflow by just like slapping more memory on the number in the background if you require more. At the cost of speed and memory. Python does that. Yes.
Sorry, how did you define null?
Null? Oh, I'm actually working from the bottom to the top on this list.
Gotcha.
So, let's talk about null versus undefined. They both basically mean the same thing, but undefined is normally reserved for literals, null is normally reserved for objects. So, if you have for example, a search operation, like query selector, that's supposed to pull up a reference to an object, and it fails, you'll get a null. If you're trying to assign a variable a value, and you haven't, you get undefined. Does that make sense? Okay. Strange literals. Functions. Yes.
How big of a crib sheet are we allowed?
1 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, double-sided.
Double-sided?
Double-sided. And please, please, please figure out how your printers work. Actually print it double-sided if you're gonna print it. Because if you bring 2 printed sheets in,
Glue them together?
I mean, see the thing is, if you glue them together, I gotta check to see if there's a pocket that you can slip more paper into. You know?
You don't wanna do that?
No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to take the thing, feel it, hold it up to the light, you know. The one thing that you're not allowed on your crib sheet is Post-it notes.
Doesn't that count as an external piece of paper?
Exactly.
Can't add paper.
You can't put more paper on your paper. So, functions.
Is it called a crib sheet because it's like you're being baby?
Yeah.
Oh,
the baby needs his crib sheet.
That's so funny. Okay.
Yeah. We had a discussion about this in the faculty. The faculty over lunch we discussed this, and we've discovered that hint sheet is probably the like politically correct term. But it just doesn't roll off the tongue. Hint sheet, you know? Too many T's. Cheat sheet at least rhymes, right? But crib sheet, boom, you can slap someone in the face with the word. It's one of those, you know? So, functions. Anonymous functions. We've got 2 varieties. Funzione of that nature. We also have the deadly and dreaded arrow function. Arrow function. Bloody JavaScript developers. It's a lambda. The term is lambda. So, you could, if you want like examples of these things actually doing things, these 2 are equivalent. These are equivalent syntax. You can see why people generally prefer the arrow functions. Because all programmers make all decisions based on how many characters it takes to do something, right? So arrow functions are slightly shorter, so they are preferred. Even though they do kind of like slightly weird things to scoping and contexts, and like what this means can be slightly different based on these two contexts. But then again, if you want a short sojourn in the halls of madness, try to understand what this means in JavaScript. So this is an anonymous function, this is a so-called arrow function. An arrow function is still a type of anonymous function, right? So, yeah, they're both anonymous because they don't have names. Let me ask you, if I have function foo taking x and y, console.log x and y, and I call foo 1, 2. What do I get?
12.
I get 3, yeah. What if I do that? I get 12. What if I do that?
Undefined?
Not undefined, although I would certainly give you credit for that, like, at least partial credit for that. The answer is not a number. Y in this scenario gets undefined. This 2 plus undefined, that's a numeric operation on undefined and a 2, which means that that is not a number. The result of that calculation is not a number. Very good. What is the return value of this function call?
Undefined.
Undefined, that's right. Note, this function does not contain a return statement. The closest equivalent in Java would be a void function, right? Void functions don't have to have a return statement in Java. It's implied by the ending curly brace. In JavaScript, if it doesn't have a return statement, it returns undefined. Here's a question. What is the result of this?
JS is.
That's right. So what has happened to the word stupid?
It's ignored.
Yeah, it's like somewhat.
I know you can still access it, but
Yeah. It is still possible to access it because in a JavaScript function, when you have a function, there is an array called arguments, which is produced by default, it's a reserved word, and all of the arguments, even the ones that weren't bound here, get slotted into the arguments array, and you can even loop over it and get everything out of it. This is how JavaScript handles the type of function polymorphism that you normally see in C standard library functions like printf, which can just take an infinite number of arguments, right? It's how it handles that sort of thing. But yeah, so technically you can still get it if you know how, but unless you've explicitly designed the function to take a theoretically infinite number of arguments, probably you designed it to just take the arguments you specified, in which case it gets lost. Stupid is thrown in the trash. It's just the trash can looks like this, and you can fish stuff out of the trash can if you want. Make sense? Question?
So I have a question, so since we're talking about functions and earlier we were talking about the JavaScript type system, what would happen if you compared two functions together?
Ooh.
Assuming those are the same functions.
I'm going to assume that if it's a duplicated function pointer, they'd equate it the same, otherwise they wouldn't. I'm just gonna open up my console and I'm gonna check that for you. Work, you infernal machine!
Professor,
Yeah.
is there gonna be anything on like copying variables, like references?
Not really, no. The thing I really want you to know how to use references for is like when a function expects a function as an argument, which is something that occurs frequently, right? Whenever you set up an event listener, one of those arguments is an argument expecting a function.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the time we kind of just drop an anonymous function in there, but like I expect you to know what you're doing, and that's what you're doing is you're creating an anonymous function, but a reference to any function would also fit that
So like
slot.
we can just make a function before that and then call it at the end of the file, kind of thing.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna be testing you too heavily on like, you know, aliasing and that type of thing. That does get covered in Java to an extent, and that's probably the appropriate place for it.
I don't remember Java at all.
So, function foo,
You remember that? Copying in Java.
exceed your vision. What is that even supposed to mean? Like, what does that even mean? You know? Like so many other things, it's just a collection of meaningless syllables. Come on. Fine, do it, have it your way. Okay, so function foo, function bar. Foo equals bar, false. Does foo strictly equal? No. But if I were to say, let baz equal foo, what I've basically done is I've created a duplicate reference to the same function in memory, right? So I could just as easily call baz as foo, right? Under these conditions, I'm going to assume baz is equal to foo. So if it's a duplicated function reference, it'll equate as being the same. I believe similar rules apply to objects. But honestly, if you're using equality on objects, unless you're explicitly trying to catch duplicates, you're probably programming in a deeply suboptimal manner. So, does that make sense? Any questions? All right. Shall we have the break then? Yeah, 15-minute break. Yeah, I think you guys look like you're ready for a break. All right. We shall resume class at 10:47 a.m. So, let's knock out a couple of quick ones. So, events. Two main varieties. DOM events, click events, that sort of thing. Timing events. There are two types of timing events. What are they?
Timeout and set interval.
Timeout and set interval, yes? The first is a little bit like setting your kitchen timer for your eggs to be cooked, right? Both of these take a callback function. Set interval calls the callback function once when the timeout expires. Set interval is a periodic call. It calls every so often. It sets at it calls at a set interval, if you will. Ooh, set interval. Ooh. Right? So, with respect to, add event listener, I feel like we've done this so many times, and it should be so routine for you folks at this point. It basically doesn't really need explicit review. You have a reference to an object in the DOM. Add event listener adds a particular type of, it adds an event. It binds the callback function to a particular event associated with that object. The hello world is the click event. Someone clicks on the object, it fires the function. I consider DOM manipulation to be in a similar category. You should have done it enough by this point that it should be so routine we don't really need to review it. In order to modify, yes?
What are some ways to stop the interval?
That's a good one. All right. So, with set interval, the return value of the interval is the ID value of the event. So, you bind it to a variable, right? You save it, store it. Then, when you're finished with it, perhaps you want it to execute X number of times, right? Clear interval, providing that ID number, unsets the interval, and it no longer fires. Normally, you would put this inside of an if statement of some description, right? Normally, you would also put that inside of the callback function of the interval, especially if you wanted it to, execute 10 times and then kill itself. You would have to put the if statement. Well, one way to do it is to put it inside of an if statement, inside of the callback function itself. In theory, you could write another timer that's like watching the other timer to see if it's executed X number of times, right? But there's kind of like, if you start pursuing that particular path of madness, there's no limit to the number of, like, the complexity of the organism you could create along those lines, right? So, you know, as in programming, as with everything else, keep it simple, stupid. A design is perfect not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. So, okay, good. DOM manipulation, you need to know how to pull references to DOM objects using query selector all. You need to know that. You need to know how to write properties into a DOM object reference once you've acquired it. Excuse me. Generally speaking, people were doing okay on this on the midterm. Honestly, not quite as well as I had hoped people would have those particular concepts, but, you know, by this point you've had a lot more practice. So,
Sorry, Professor, I spaced on the last thing you said that we needed to. The accessing the.
yeah, you need to be able to access and write properties of DOM objects. Anybody have, let's just cross that out. Anybody have anything they want to, you know, any order they want to cover things in?
Bootstrap.
Bootstrap?
Yeah.
Review how the grid system works, right? Review the general concepts. What is a CDN, content delivery network? What's the advantage of that over a local copy of the thing, right? So yes?
So basically, like, the grid system works on like a 12-point grid system, content delivery network, it auto updates, you don't have to worry about it, less overhead, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then do we have to remember anything on JavaScript components, or?
No.
No?
I mean, the JavaScript components, even in the assignment, were like a copy-paste affair anyways, right? So,
Yeah, okay.
I am comfortable saying that Bootstrap is not going to be an area focused on very heavily during the exam.
Okay.
To the point where I think that's as much as I want to say about it. Review the topics, give it a read through, alright? Anything else?
Animation.
Animation, CSS animation, is that what you were gonna say?
I was gonna say SVG, but that works.
That was
Yeah.
gonna be my next one,
That-
but since I chose, we could do SVG.
You pick the last
Yeah.
one, we'll do you, and then we'll come back, okay? Alright, so SVG. SVG was kind of a big unit, right? There were a couple of subtopics in there. I consider the following things to be important. Fair enough? So, with creating SVG graphics, I would expect all of you to have a certain degree of familiarity with the XML syntax of the SVG itself, right? If I gave you, hypothetically speaking, a picture, simple picture, on the exam, I would expect you to be able to write an SVG that approximately implemented the image, right? I'm not looking for exact ratios and pixel perfect implementation, you know, but if there's a if there's a square here, I want you to write a square that's in that vague area of the correct color-ish. If there's a circle over there, a circle in your SVG of the approximate location, and you know, you're not using width and height on a circle, you're using CX, CY, and radius, right? That type of thing. I would expect you to be able to draw something in SVG. Okay? Historically speaking, I've found that geometry is like a weak point in the classes I've taught. So I hope you guys will prove that you guys are superior in your geometric skills to previous students I have taught.
No shot.
Hmm?
No shot.
Yeah, well, but like even basic stuff like reading coordinates off of a plane, you know,
Oh.
just seems to confuzzle people, you know.
I know a guy that couldn't plot X that went into McMaster BTech.
Did he graduate?
Yeah, he's actually an insanely good programmer now.
Okay, well, all right.
He took the
Probably
pathways.
not doing much geometry though. Unless he learned geometry, I suppose.
No, he did. He learned calc trig, all that stuff.
Good.
He writes Rust now.
Ooh. This is what I like. This is what I attribute it to. All right. I do not think it's any particular failing on the part of the students. I attribute it to the absolute abysmal state of the education system in this region of the world.
I mean, he's very similar to me. Kind of didn't really put his full foot forward, and then was humbled in university.
Yeah.
So.
Once you it really like it's kind of awful to say, but like the first real humbling moment should be grade 9, you know, or earlier if you can manage it. But like, you know, the fact that anybody gets graduated out of high school without being able to tell me like what is the location of that point, right?
What do you mean?
Like, what are the coordinates of this point?
It's given.
Yes. I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you get me? Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. So, I don't know, I should give you all back to Frozina. She should,
She's
What
a
you-
goat.
she's great, eh?
She caught me up on my math exponentially.
Yeah, like, man, you know she's on the Board of Governors now? She got elected to the Board of Governors.
There
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah, like, man, I said, I voted for her, and I said to her, you know, it's important that these types of positions be held by some people of intelligence, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
She's like immaculate. Like I thought I was like dumb, like dumb, and then I went into her class and I was like, no, I was just not taught anything.
Yeah.
It's like she has a psychology degree too. She knows, like, for example, in middle class, she'll tell us exactly what we're thinking.
Yes!
Yeah! Dude, she's so good.
Yeah, no, she's, yeah. Oh, man.
Even during COVID, her classes, immaculate. She had her little see-through board writing backwards, so everyone, like, primo.
Yeah, oh, man. Yeah, as many of us can only aspire to that
Yeah.
level of amazingness.
Every student I've ever talked to who's had her, she's a legend.
Yeah, like, I don't, like, understand when I criticize things like your geometric knowledge, I'm not leveling the accusation at you necessarily. I just think that your teachers all through elementary and high school have basically done nothing but try to sabotage your mathematical skill. But so it goes. Boy, I said that on tape, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Very good.
I was just thinking that.
Elementary school teachers, shape up. The problem is they can't teach math they can't do themselves. Ooh! Bloody arts majors. Alright. So, where are we? Yes, SVG. So, you should be able to, create a simple SVG diagram. I'm not going to ask you to do the Mona Lisa, don't worry, right? JavaScript manipulation of SVG objects. Largely very much the same as JavaScript manipulation of regular HTML objects. One difference, rather than directly accessing the properties using dot notation, you need to use setAttribute and getAttribute. The attribute being provided as a string. Like so. That's actually wrong. Rectangle. There we go. You can't directly access X and Y, you have to go through get and set attribute. Otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same, like you even pull a reference the same. Yeah?
Just something I found on the other assignments. Get attribute always returns a string. So sometimes you want to add something and it becomes 10 plus 5, then it becomes 105 rather than 15.
Regular attributes do this as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's awful, right? Because if you in your imagining that this is a language for normal people that works the way you expect it to, if you want to do something really simple like read this attribute, like add 10 and then set it again, right? This returns as a string and will often have the units attached, right? So you might have 10 pixels 10, right? And then you try to write that back in and everything snaps to 0 because that's nonsense. Yeah.
You can just wrap it in a parse in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What you're missing is number dot parse int.
Can it
You gotta
just be
parse
number?
that as an integer. Meh.
Can it just be number?
No, it
Yeah,
can
I forget if it's you have to go through the object or you can just do parse int.
No, just
You do
just number
because
works.
no, you don't, because I got dinged on assignment 2 for not accessing the object method.
Really?
Let's see here. Number dot parse int 54. Yeah. Does just parse int do it? Seems to.
No, I use just numbers.
Oh, just
Parse
number.
int by itself is good enough, but just using numbers does not.
It did when I just tried it.
Yeah, it works when I did an assignment.
Oh, but if it includes the pixels at the end, then you get not a number.
Oh, okay.
Whereas if you use number dot parse int 50 pixels, you get 50.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
Because parse in takes the number and then forgets the other characters, whereas number I think just I can't remember. I looked it up after because I was very confused, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, So what it's actually doing is it's using the C standard library function for integer conversion, which reads the string up to the first non-numeric character and then it takes whatever it's got,
Yeah.
right? So for example, the string, which I just tried, 50 dogs on a hot summer's day, still parses as 50, right? Even if you include additional numbers in it. So, yes. Anyway, number.parseInt. Otherwise, you might run into trouble. And we shouldn't be having these types of conversations. You know, I shouldn't be having to explain the esoteric difference between calling like number.parseInt or just parseInt or just number converted. Like, there should be one way, and it should work the same way every time. JavaScript hates you. JavaScript hates you.
And we hate JavaScript.
Yay! Somebody finally said it. Yay! Okay. Animation. Animation is the slight modification of an image over time to produce the illusion of movement. To do this, the way that I have taught you is to use setInterval to set up a frame timer, right? If you want 60 frames per second, you divide 1,000 by the number of frames per second, take that number, you know, round it to whatever, and that's how often, that's the period of your intervals. That is the interval, right? Within the function inside of the setInterval, this is where you perform your slight modification every frame, right? This will normally involve reading a property, performing some slight modification, quite similarly to that thing where I was adding 10 pixels, right? That thing there. And then you write it back again, right? It's like, if I want to move something like 1 pixel to the left, I read its x position, I add 1, then I write it back. And that's the loop, right? It's also useful to know how to combine that with stopping the animation so that it doesn't just run off the screen, right? Generally, it's not a great idea to kill the entire like timing function because you may be using it for a lot of things, right? It's kind of useful to have one frame update function, right? But yeah, does that make sense? Questions about that? Hopefully that's a process everybody did on their assignment 4. Yes?
I did something similar, but could you show adding to the number again? I know you did it with the get method, but
So why don't I just do like a quick little mock-up of what I'm talking about. So let's assume that we have a square, right? We use query selector to grab the reference. setInterval function. Frame rate, 60 frames per second is 16.67. I just know that from memory, right?
Nerd.
Yes, guilty as charged. I've taught this class enough times. Number 1, you read the property. Let's say it was exactly the thing. We're trying to move it 1 pixel to the left, right? Let x equal square dot get attribute x I'm just gonna like integer convert it on this line, cause the lines get a little long, right? Number dot parse int x plus 1. Then we write it back, square dot set attribute x, and then this value of this x variable. If you want to be really like all bad about it, you can also throw the units on, right? That's it.
Thank you.
Then maybe like an if statement here that clears the interval when a condition is met.
That would be like a long question at the end of an exam.
Well, you can see that this is actually not that many lines of code. So, unlike Java, there is no question on the exam for which the instructor's solution is more than 25 lines of code.
It can be done in one line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But should you?
No, it shouldn't.
That's always the
I did
question.
it a lot on the assignment, but it gets very convoluted.
Let me put it to you this way. The paper is only so wide, right?
Yeah.
Please think of your poor, poor professor who has to read all of this handwritten code. You guys complain about having to write all of the handwritten code. Do I ever complain about having to read it? Yes, I just did. So yeah, yeah, you can break it up however you want. Like, I'm not one of these professors that unless you do it the exact way I did it in class, I'm gonna give you a 0. Like, so long as you have all of the operations there and they work, that's how you're gonna get graded, right? Very often on coding questions, have I told you guys like my general method for coding questions, how I grade them? So, my primary consideration for coding questions is, if I took this and I put it in a file and I fed it to the compiler, how long would I have to work to get it to run? How many errors would I have to fix, right? If the errors I have to fix are like minor syntax errors, right? Missing braces, curly, the semicolons, that sort of thing, you're getting perfect or near perfect, right? Because I'm not heavily concerned that you remember all of the semicolons, right? If you're starting to make a few like type errors, that sort of thing, type errors, logic errors, you know, like failure to correctly encode the Boolean condition for an if statement, right? We're now kind of sinking from an A level to a B level, right? I like off by 1 errors and loops and things of that nature, right? Those are harder to diagnose and fix, but they're still reasonable, right? Below this, you're starting to miss requirements of the question, right? So like, if the question has like 4 bullet points on the things that it needs, and you only do 3 of them, or you only do 2 of them, you're kind of now going into like C range, maybe high D's, right? Significant lack of what the question was asking for kind of pushes you down into a D and low D territory. Possibly even like, you know, an F level. Below that, it's kind of like the code is like substantially incomplete, or like the question was not understood, or you know, you gave me JavaScript, or you gave me Java on the JavaScript exam, or like this is Python, right? Happens more frequently than you might think, right? You know, basically, whenever I detect Python in the JavaScript exam, you get in all caps with 3 exclamation points, Python! And then you get close to 0 for whatever you wrote Python out for. Oh man, it's very, very important in this program and in life generally not to kind of rest on your laurels, you know, get through Python, think you know programming, and then, you know, imagine that your Python knowledge from first semester will carry you through the whole darned diploma. Substantially not the case. And this is the semester where you find that out. This is also particularly true of people who came into the program already knowing some programming from like high school, or you know, the bedroom programmers. Like, the purpose of this diploma is not to validate your pre-existing knowledge of programming. It is to teach you what you need to know to get a job. So that's how I grade coding questions. Like, the closer it is to something I could just chuck into the computer and it would work, the better your grade will be. And all of it ultimately boils down to reading comprehension, right? That's the hidden skill. That's the hidden skill that underlies pretty much all test performance is, can you read and understand the question? If you can't do that, then you're not going to get the answer, right? Because this is, you know, I have heard tests criticized as like, oh, people pass tests by accident. It's like, well, maybe for multiple choice, if you're very lucky, but sure as hell nobody passes my tests by accident.
That's kind of comforting. That's kind of comforting.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, I mean, I like to think that, like, if you got a good mark in my class, you earned it, and you should feel good about yourself, because you earned it. And if you got a bad mark, you should try harder next time. So, that's animation. Object creation and destruction. Object creation is a 3-step process. First step, you need to create the object as a variable in JavaScript. So let, you know, new equal document dot create element. NS if it's an SVG element, but you stop there if it's just an HTML element. NS. Typically there's an SVG NS variable. You make the website a constant at the top. Put that on your cheat sheet. Then you specify what type of element you're creating. Perhaps it's a rectangle. Next, you assign attributes. These things come blank, so you have to give them all of their appropriate attributes. Using the same mechanism we already discussed, right? New dot set attribute, right? You do that a few times for a few different attributes. Finally, you must bind the new object to its position inside the DOM. Most of the time with SVGs, we just use that as the SVG pane itself, because unless you're introducing groups, you're not really subgrouping SVG components. It's not something we discussed how to do in class. Pardon me. So, probably you'll have something that looks like this. And that's the process for creating a component in JavaScript and plugging it in. The process for regular HTML components is very, very similar. You just set properties in the normal way. You get rid of the NS here and SVG NS. You just say what it is you want to make, give it some properties, bind it to a location in the DOM. Make sense? Any questions? CSS animation. The type of CSS animation we discussed in class was keyframe animation. You create one using the keyframes tag. You then must select a name for the animation. Let's call it foo for no reason in particular. What follows is a sequence of CSS rules which are bound to tags indicating time. The simplest form of this is from and to, which indicate the beginning and the end frame of the animation. However, we also discussed all of the percentages. At the beginning of the animation, halfway through the animation, at the end of the animation. Afterwards, you provide for each of these keyframes, a CSS rule setting various properties. Color, red, color, blue, color, green. So long as the properties that are being modified are numeric, or can be construed as numeric, the engine will automatically calculate all of the intermediate states between red and blue, all of the intermediate colors, and it will smoothly cycle through these as we progress through the animation. Right? Not all properties have numeric equivalents. Can anybody give me an example of a non-numeric CSS property?
Border type?
Border type. Very good. Any others? Text align? Yeah. Yeah.
Background color?
Background color is a color, and colors are ultimately reduced to RGB values. So not that one. The thing that I was thinking in my head that nobody guessed is font. Font is like a pretty, that's a good example. Like if you have ever noticed, if you try to like transition between different fonts inside of a CSS animation, it kind of just pops to the next one as soon as you hit the frame, right? Unfortunately, the CSS engine is not, capable of calculating the intermediate state between like lowercase a in Calibri and Helvetica, right? So it just kind of pops the new font on when you hit the frame. But yeah, those types of properties are just, when you hit the frame, you get the new value. Everything else, you calculate the intermediate state and you smoothly transition. Make sense? If you want the animation to loop seamlessly, the last frame and the first frame have to have the same properties. So the color here would need to be red. Hopefully I'm not causing anybody cognitive dissonance by writing red and blue. If you change this rule so that it exactly and perfectly reflects this rule, then you get a smooth transition at the end. Otherwise, there's no transition between 0 and 100%. It will simply flop automatically from 100% to 0. Make sense? Okay, so we have the definition for the animation. The next thing we need to do is apply this animation to whatever page element we wish to animate. We do this with a regular CSS rule. So for example, perhaps I wish all paragraphs to undergo this change. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that from a UI UX standpoint, but you write a CSS rule for the paragraph element. There are then 3 properties to be concerned about. Animation name, animation duration, animation iteration count. By the way, you are permitted to put code examples from the class on your cheat sheet. The animation name is the name of the animation you wish to apply. In this case, foo. Animation duration is the amount of time we wish the animation to occupy. So if we want all of this to occur in 3 seconds, we write 3 seconds. Incidentally, if that's the case, how many seconds in does this frame happen? 1.5. 1.5, right. Animation iteration count is the number of times we want the animation to loop. If we want this animation to loop 10 times then quit, we write in 10. If we want it to go forever, we write in infinite. Make sense? So that's really the long and the short of it. Yes?
Does iteration have a default value that CSS automatically has?
I think it's 1. It's either 1 or infinite.
For what though?
Animation iteration count, does it have a default value?
Pretty sure it is 1.
Yeah, yes. Formal definition, initial value 1. I'm looking this up in the MDN docs. So W3 schools is pretty good, but it's for students. If you want like the real reference with all the data, check out the MDN documentation. It's complete. Complete documentation. Make sense?
JSON.
JSON. I really feel bad for anybody whose actual name is Jason in this program. So CSS rules look a lot like JavaScript objects, but they're not the same thing. So, actually, we're not doing too badly for time, are we?
No.
JavaScript object notation. What type of braces do objects use? Curly braces. Curly braces mean object. What about a list? Square braces? Other things that you can have in JSON, literals of type string, Boolean, integer, float, and nulls. So JSON is a nested hierarchical structure. At the top level, it has to be one of these, but everything else can be any of these, right? So, for example, maybe I start things off with a list this time. Are they legs? I'm not sure if you'd call them legs, you know?
Appendages.
Yeah, appendages, yeah. Anyway, so JSON structure. At the top level, we have a list. Each item inside of the list is an object, but of course, we can also just tack more data on here. Lists do not have to be monotyped. So we could just say fruit salad as a string after all of our objects, and that's fine. Although you don't generally do that. JSON is not, like there's nothing constraining the structure of a JSON object except you, right? Yes.
Don't you do that when you're making like packages? Like package.json, for example?
Yeah, sometimes it gets used, right?
It's like a filler for a title or a header.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. But like, if what you're doing is if you're looping through this thing and expecting each one of these things to be an animal object, you're going to be disappointed when you get to the end, right? So you need to know how to pull information out of one of these things, right? you need to know how to loop over an object as well. The way that you loop over an object, my recommended way of doing it is a for in loop, for constant key in, let's say this is, let a equal in a. Then you can access the key. Using key, you can access the value by a add key, which is kind of similar to how Python does it, actually. That's not proper syntax. Right? So, if I were to substitute this for, because that's currently a list, that doesn't make any sense. A at 0, right? For key, the first thing I get would be animal. Second thing I get is legs. Therefore, A at key for the first iteration would be lobster, and for the second would be 10. Right? Does that make sense? Question?
I know in Java that like enhanced for loops don't overwrite, like, so you could, if you really wanted to use it, you couldn't add anything. What about in JavaScript? Let's say if I add a line under that to add the key into something.
Well, adding a new key to the object is not something I recommend doing inside of the loop, because believe it or not, you can get yourself into an infinite loop doing that, right? So, imagine a scenario where you have an object, you're looping over it, and you're adding a new key value pair to the object each loop iteration. Do you ever reach the end? No, because you're adding to it as fast as you're consuming it. So that actually technically produces an infinite loop.
Yeah, but I meant can you take the key from, there's two keys in that one object, yes. Can you place that into a table for using the for loop that you have on?
Yeah. You can even write into the data structure using this, because the key being constant, right, just means that a at key is just the region in the data structure, right? So if you wanted to assign it something, that's fine and that works. The problem that you get into in Java is and this is actually kind of good review for Java right now. If you have an array of objects in Java, right? Each one of these is like an object reference to some object which is instantiated in memory, right? So if you have the loop variable, let's call it obj, right? This reference is duplicated into the loop variable each iteration. So you basically have a duplicate reference to this guy up here, right? Which means you can access methods, right? You can access methods and stuff. But what it doesn't mean is you can't create a new object here and imagine that it pops in here. Because that's kind of like you're creating a new reference, right? So in Java, right, if this is initially filled with nulls, right, you've got your loop, you create the new object, object is equal to new, cheeseburger, makes a new cheeseburger object, right? This reference does not insert itself into the array automatically, right? So what happens is you then hit the next loop iteration. This thing, this arrow is deallocated. This is therefore eventually garbage collected. You make a new one, you assign your reference there. This is not changing, right? The original array is not changing. So that's the tricky bit that is discussed in the Java course.
Got
Any other questions? Yes.
For JSON, it's more accessing data, not structuring data.
Well, yeah, at this phase,
For the test.
for the test, yeah. We don't really, like, in order to structure the data, you need some data to structure. It's sort of a topic that we get into more in server side, right? If you're constructing the data to be sent to the client, then you're constructing a JSON in some cases. But the client is, like, for us, often just passively receiving it, right? Which is kind of the way that we've been doing things so far. There's nothing preventing the client from sending JSON, of course, right? I don't know, it's just not something that the course currently asks you to ever do, so it's not going to be on the exam. Yeah. You do need to know how to read and work with existing JSON structures, though. Any other questions? So, yes.
What about CSS?
What about CSS? Indeed. I kind of tested you on the first test on CSS, you know. It's not a topic with a lot of punch to it even to begin with, you know. You know the ordering question of like ordering the different CSS selectors? It's basically all I got, and I already asked that question, so.
It's not on the exam, or?
I will neither confirm nor deny that any particular thing is ever on or off of an exam. But let's just say you're probably safe focusing your studying elsewhere. Certainly you should review it. You should review everything, but yeah. It's kind of an interesting little, it's an interesting little subtopic, the CSS stuff. It's not surviving the rewrite, that material, actually. Because, like, what is it even doing in this course? That's like HTML, CSS, we've got a whole course for that, why is it here, you know? Yeah, I'd much rather give you, like, 3 weeks on React, you know? I mean, 3 weeks on React is, like, enough to whet your appetite, you know? But you can at least say you've had some React exposure before you're sent off for your co-ops to try it again, you know? Yeah. Am I missing anything? Class is almost done. Any questions? Anything you want to ask yet?
Is there gonna be any particular, like, is there gonna be an even distribution? Or do you think you're gonna weight some parts more heavily? In terms
The
of
rule
content?
for this exam is the rule for most exams, I would say. It's going to be weighted more heavily towards the stuff that we didn't cover on the midterm. That is the second half of the course. So you almost want to study backwards, right? Prioritize SVG and AJAX, right? I reserve the right to ask you questions on anything on that list, but you should prioritize the stuff we've done since the midterm. Question?
Is it a 2 or 3 hour exam?
Would it be fair to say, since you weren't quite impressed with the class's DOM manipulation, that there will be more of that on this test because you wanna make sure we understand it?
When it comes to DOM manipulation, I can almost not even I almost can't even ask you a question that doesn't use it. Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So in that respect, don't worry, everybody will have their second time to come up to bat. So, yeah, I do reserve the right to ask on subjects that everybody got wrong on the midterm though. So, because I want to see if you learned anything. Yeah.
Sorry, this isn't like an example, but like, are there any other resources for learning about this? Like, I use the tutoring comment, but that's like 3 hours a week. Is there anything else that you would recommend to further ourselves in this?
Well, have you done all of the exercises that are published in Canvas? That's the first place to start. If you take a look at the modules, there are exercise documents that are exercises, particularly, they're designed to reinforce the specific material that we covered in class. Therefore, they are most tightly focused to what we did and have the least probability of wasting your time. However, there are good, in terms of general practice, there's a website that is kind of, I often recommend it to people, and people kind of don't know it exists often. W3 Resource?
Resource? No.
Yeah, everybody knows W3 Schools, but there's a website that's specifically practice problems, and it's not the it's not that kind of quiz system that they built into W3 Schools. W3 Resource, Web Development Tutorials. There you go. JavaScript. There you go. Oh look. Exercises on operators. Right? Even the strange ones. There are ads. But there are also ads on W3 Schools. Oh, and it's a little annoying, but
Professor, there was a website that you showed a while ago for visualization.
Ah, yes. Python tutor. You may think, oh, but this isn't Python, but guess what? Python, Java, C++, and JavaScript. So basically, you write a program. Visualize. Oh, wait, what? Oh, I'm in Python mode. You gotta select on the drop down. There you go. Visualize. There you go. And it allows you to step through and view what the actual values of variables are in the actual fleeting stack frames. So and it does arrows to show you where your pointers are going. It's so good, so good. Especially if you're trying to understand references. The only limitation of it is that it won't it'll choke on things over a certain size, and when it comes to Java, it needs everything to be in one file, so you gotta know how to convert your stuff so that all of your classes are in one file. But past that point, it's an excellent thing to understand how your code is actually behaving. It's a little bit like a standard debugger where they've had a breakpoint at every line, and then they allow you to sort of zip through the history of the debugger. Very, very nice, very good, like it a lot. So yeah. Coding bat often gets thrown around as well, although it doesn't have JavaScript exercises. Yeah.
There's a module that has a bunch of questions that I'm pretty sure links to W3 resources in the, I think the JavaScript module.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Although, again, I would start with the exercises in as published in Canvas. I think I've run 2 minutes over, so I think we'll end class here. Unless there are any more questions. Okay. Well, in that case, I won't see you all again before the exam, or the Java exam. So, good luck, study hard, and remember, no matter how things turns out, it'll all be over in a couple of weeks. So, have a good summer. Consider joining the Game Dev Club in the fall. We're going to need fresh meat